The studio lights came on the way they always do, steady and familiar, but on this particular morning, something in the air felt quieter. When Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos appeared on screen, viewers immediately sensed the shift. There were no opening jokes, no playful back and forth, no easing into the day. Instead, there was a pause, the kind that invites attention rather than fills space. Their expressions carried a weight that didn't need explanation. Mark spoke first, his voice measured and careful as though each word had been gently placed rather than spoken. Kelly sat beside him, present but visibly emotional. In that moment, the studio stopped feeling like a set and began to feel like a living room, where difficult news is shared honestly and without performance. When television steps aside for real life. Daytime television is built on rhythm, energy, familiarity, predictability, but that rhythm paused as Kelly and Mark allowed something more human to take its place. They didn't rush, they didn't soften the moment with humor. Instead, they let silence exist, trusting the audience to understand that some things cannot be transitioned into lightly. It was a reminder that behind the bright lights and daily routines are real people whose lives continue unfolding off camera. The vulnerability of that moment didn't feel strategic or rehearsed. It felt necessary. Chewie's place in the family story. Chewie was not just a pet in the household. She was part of the family's emotional landscape. She arrived years ago through an adoption connected to the show, a small segment that grew into a lasting bond. Over time, Chewie became woven into daily life, present during childhood milestones, quiet evenings, and transitions that come with growing older. Kelly spoke of her as a steady presence, one that didn't demand attention but offered comfort simply by being there. Mark described her as dignified and observant, a companion who seemed to understand the rhythm of the household better than anyone else. A change that happened. Gradually. The weeks leading up to the goodbye were marked by subtle changes rather than sudden alarm. Chewie slowed down. Her energy shifted. Things that once brought excitement no longer held the same spark. Kelly and Mark described watching closely, listening carefully, and doing what families do when someone they love begins to struggle. There was no panic, only attentiveness. They sought guidance, made thoughtful decisions, and focused on comfort. The process was quiet, heavy, and deeply personal, shaped by love rather than urgency. Knowing when love means letting go. One of the hardest truths in loving an animal is understanding when care must change form. Kelly and Mark spoke gently about recognizing that Chewie's comfort mattered more than holding on. It was not a sudden decision, but one that came from watching, listening, and honoring what she needed. Mark framed it as an act of kindness rather than loss, explaining that sometimes love means easing suffering rather than prolonging presence. Kelly's tears reflected how deeply that understanding hurts, even when it is rooted in compassion. Grief without apology. As Kelly allowed her emotions to surface on air, she admitted that she hadn't anticipated how overwhelming the moment would feel. Her honesty resonated immediately. There was no attempt to minimize the loss or move past it quickly. Instead, she spoke through tears, acknowledging that grief does not follow rules or timelines. Mark remained steady beside her, offering quiet reassurance, his presence grounding the moment. Together, they showed that mourning doesn't require explanation or justification, especially when it comes to a bond built on years of unconditional companionship. Remembering the little things. As the conversation continued, memories surfaced naturally. Chewie's personality came alive through small details, the way she preferred gentle pats instead of kisses, how she expressed affection in her own reserved way, how she seemed to supervise family gatherings from a distance. Mark smiled as he described her subtle confidence, the way she made her presence known without demanding attention. These memories brought moments of soft laughter, the kind that doesn't erase sadness but sits alongside it, reminding everyone that love is often found in the smallest, most ordinary moments. When humor gently returns. Even in grief, humor found its way back, not as avoidance but as tribute. Kelly and Mark shared stories that captured Chewie's unique character, and for brief moments the heaviness lifted. The laughter was gentle and bittersweet, shaped by affection rather than performance. It was a reminder that joy and sorrow are not opposites, but companions, often existing together when love runs deep. A loss. Many understand too well. What made the moment resonate so deeply was its familiarity. For countless viewers, Chewie's passing mirrored their own experiences with beloved pets. Messages began pouring in almost immediately, stories of dogs and cats who had shared lives, homes, and hearts. Photos, memories, and words of comfort filled social media. The broadcast became something larger than a segment. It became a shared space for remembering and honoring the animals that shape our lives in quiet, profound ways. Grief shared becomes connection. Kelly and Mark acknowledged the outpouring of support with visible gratitude. They spoke about how comforting it was to hear from people who understood that losing a pet is not a small loss. It is the loss of routine, companionship, and a presence that offers love without conditions. By sharing their experience openly, they allowed others to feel seen in their own grief, transforming personal sorrow into communal empathy. Navigating public emotion with care. Grieving on live television is not easy, and Kelly and Mark approached it with care and intention. They didn't overshare or dramatize. They simply told the truth of where they were. Their balance of openness and restraint created space for viewers to connect without feeling overwhelmed. It was a lesson in how vulnerability, when handled thoughtfully, can bring people together rather than push them away. Partnership in the middle of loss. Throughout the segment, the strength of Kelly and Mark's partnership was evident. He supported her when emotions overwhelmed her words. She shared memories that gave voice to their shared experience. Neither tried to lead or retreat. They moved through the moment together. It was a quiet demonstration of how shared grief can deepen connection when faced side by side. The silence that follows. Goodbye after a loss, silence settles differently. Kelly reflected on how the house felt quieter without Chewie's presence, how routines subtly changed. The absence was not dramatic but constant, felt in moments that once passed unnoticed. The family was adjusting not just to loss but to the space left behind, a process that takes time and gentleness. Honoring a life through memory. Rather than framing Chewie's story around sadness alone, Kelly and Mark focused on gratitude. They spoke about the years they were lucky to have, the comfort she gave, and the love she offered so freely. Remembering became an act of honoring, a way to keep her presence alive through stories and reflection. Why this moment mattered. This wasn't just a television moment, it was a reminder that grief is universal and that love, in all its forms, deserves acknowledgement. By choosing honesty over polish, Kelly and Mark created a space where emotions were allowed to exist without judgment. In doing so, they reminded viewers that it's okay to mourn deeply, even when the loss might seem small to others. A gentle lesson in empathy. Chewie's story offered a quiet lesson. Compassion matters, especially in moments of loss. Kelly and Mark's willingness to share their grief validated the experiences of countless people who have loved and lost animals that felt like family. Their openness encouraged empathy, patience, and understanding, qualities that often feel rare in public spaces. Carrying love forward. As the show moved on, the emotional weight didn't disappear, but it softened. Kelly and Mark had done something meaningful. They had honored a life, shared a loss, and connected with millions through honesty. Chewie's legacy lived not in headlines or segments, but in the reminder that love leaves an imprint long after presence fades.